Indeed, it's 6:33 here, European time. So maybe let's kick it off. I'm sure there will be more and more people coming in as we go. But there will also be a recording of this, as you can see. So, you could be watching this back later as well. I'll do a quick introduction. My name is Omri Price, and I'm the Director of Alliance for Europe, based here in Europe, speaking to you from Brussels. You might see behind me the beautiful Church of Saint Boniface. And Alliance for Europe is a non-profit organization that works to advance democracy in Europe, as the name suggests. And we have been working very hard at this nexus between democracy and technology, and the fact that our digital democracy is very important to foster. And some time ago, we were introduced to our wonderful partners, Goodly Labs, and their connection to UC Berkeley as well, and the tool of Public Editor that they've developed, which is both a collective intelligence tool to counter disinformation, as well as a wonderful media literacy training program, and essentially a gamified training course that all of you have signed up to take part in. And so without much further ado, I will pass us on to Nick, who is the director of Goodly Labs and the developer of Public Editor, to essentially kick off this project. This phase, maybe just as a last bit of preamble, this is essentially the first phase of a much broader rollout that we would hope to have, where this tool has been tested in various places before, has been developed with a lot of input and research that has gone into it. We're now rolling it out in an initial phase and hope to be rolling it out much further. So by taking part in this, you don't only get your own training, you're also contributing to a much larger social impact. And so this is very, very exciting for us at Alliance for Europe to be taking part in. And we're really looking forward to seeing how this goes. And Nick, there you go, over to you.
Thank you, Omri. Thank you, George. And many thanks to everyone who's here today to learn about Public Editor and to take part in this study. As you've already read from some of the emails we've been sending around, we expect to learn a lot about the Public Editor system and the best ways to incentivize and support the work of our annotators, many of whom are volunteers and really the people who do the work that helps mitigate the problem of misinformation in the news. Let me jump here into a presentation about Public Editor so that everyone has an understanding of the system and their role in helping the system work and really combat misinformation. The goal of Public Editor, of course, is to really share reality again across Europe and the United States and really around the world. We've seen that the combination of social media platforms with unscrupulous journalists has led to a situation where there are many different pockets of reality that people live in without understanding kind of the common reality that unites us all. And this is impacting all of our decisions. We've seen it impact health decisions, especially in the case of COVID-19. It's impacting political decisions so that people are making choices based on false information, and they don't seem to have a way to understand how that information is incorrect. It's affecting our decisions about energy policy, and just generally, if we look across Europe and the United States and most Western democracies, we see a declining trust in major institutions to the point where our societies are to some extent breaking down. So we want to help create a world where there is something like a trustworthy source of truth. We understand that's a very tall order. There are a lot of scientists who have worked on this project, social scientists, cognitive scientists, journalists and librarians. So we understand that to even propose a trustworthy source of truth is a very tall order, but we want to show you today a very transparent system that takes that goal, that very high ambition, and we take it step by step in a way that people can follow along and trust in a shared reality. So far, we've already had some pretty good success proving that the system is really useful and helpful. We've previously done a study with a group called EU versus Disinfo. This is a set of experts who find disinformation often in propaganda articles. And we compared their work finding disinformation to the results of Public Editor when it looks at the same articles. And our annotators, who are volunteers, they're not really trained experts in finding disinformation, followed our protocols, the same annotation protocols we'll show you today and that you'll work with over the next few weeks. Following those protocols, we were able to find misinformation across all of these disinformation articles, across all of these propaganda articles. In 100% of cases, reviewers found that the labels we applied to articles were useful and credible. In 94% of cases, we found the very same mistakes that experts had found. And in 86% of the articles, we found new mistakes the experts had not missed. I'll say that again, in 86%, nearly 9 out of 10 articles, that we found misinformation that even the experts did not find. So we know the system is quite effective. And it's effective in ways that even computers aren't. The system itself is mostly relying upon human input from volunteers like you. So we can actually apply human judgment that is capable of recognizing complex and nuanced misinformation that might come in the form of metaphors or sarcasm, nuances and context-dependent information that might not appear like anything false to a computer algorithm, but within context is clearly meant to mislead or misinform people. The system itself is going to help you strengthen your media literacy and your critical thinking skills, but also the work that you do gets shared with other newsreaders in your community so that they also become more media literate. We try to use very intuitive interfaces and to have a diverse pool of participants. And when you end up doing these tasks, you'll see you're focusing on one little task at a time, one little block of text, and answering questions about it. So the tasks are really designed to focus you through a clear kind of analysis protocol that is pretty de-biased compared to something like reading an article and just giving it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. We'll see how that works throughout the presentation and throughout the next few weeks. One of the big advantages and hopes for Public Editor is that it will be adopted by some of these platforms like Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, etc. And that it will actually provide a way to mediate and improve the content on those platforms without resorting to censorship. So at Public Editor, we actually like misinformation at Public Editor because each example of misinformation becomes a learning opportunity for the rest of the news reading public. So whereas some people kind of get into a big debate about censoring content or not censoring content, at least when it comes to misinformation, you know, there's really harmful content that's just, you know, kind of atrocious that governments and platforms might want to keep out of the public news diet. But when we're talking about basic misinformation, falsehoods, cognitive errors and biases, rhetorical flourishes, and the like, we don't have to censor those things. We can actually use them as learning examples for teaching. We'll also get to a place where the platforms can use Public Editor's ratings. Public Editor rates articles from 0 to 100 in terms of credibility. Those platforms will be able to use that rating score, that credibility rating score for the articles in a way that allows their users to set a threshold for the quality of content that appears in their newsfeed. So imagine you're on Facebook or Twitter, and you can actually set a threshold, and any articles that are below a 70 or a 75 or an 80 or a 65 or whatever you choose, any articles that are below a certain credibility rating will not appear in your newsfeed. That's what we're looking forward to in the future. Let me say a little bit about the process whereby we label misinformation in articles. So the first thing that we do is we find articles that are already very popular, that are going viral. We want to make sure that we are addressing the articles that most people are seeing on social media platforms. And then the next thing that we do is we take the article and we have people find different passages in the article that need further evaluation. In this first stage, no one in our volunteer community is actually making an evaluation. No one's saying anything is wrong or right, or that it deserves to have 2 points removed or anything like that. It's just finding separate passages. Once those passages are found, they get sent along to a second stage of annotation, where people are looking at a smaller passage, and then they're answering a set of questions about that. And when you answer those questions, you end up kind of generating an evaluation that says, oh, this is a particular type of error. Maybe it's a false dilemma, or maybe it's an error that we call ignoring selection effects. I'll show you some of these errors today, and you'll learn about a lot of them over the next couple of weeks. Once an error is identified, you have an opportunity to rate how egregious, how problematic the error is. And that can be used to set a score anywhere from -4 points to a +2 points if it's not an error at all, if it's actually something positive in the article. We're also very careful to make sure that errors occurring in the main argument of an article are scored down more than errors that might occur in some less important part of the article. So to show you that again in a different schematic, we start at the top with an article. There's a first stage of annotation where we're looking for the formal elements of an article and the semantic elements, the meaning kind of elements of an article. And then we send those smaller chunks of text along to stage 2 annotators. Everything that you'll be doing over the next 3 weeks is stage 2 annotation, where you're just looking at a smaller passage of text. What I'd like to do right now is actually show you what that looks like in the public editor interface. So let me pop over to a different screen so I can show you what that looks like. And I want to show you a task that is a semantic triage task. And then I will show you a language task, which is a downstream task, if you think of this as kind of an assembly line of annotation tasks. So this is a task that you all won't really be doing over the next few weeks, but it shows you how the system works. So we start with an article, and it's someone's job to apply these different labels here on the left to the actual text of the article. And all the instructions for applying these labels are here in the bottom. So if my job is to read through this article and look for probabilistic statements, here I'm looking for any text containing annotations of probabilistic reasoning or other reasoning about uncertainty, both good and bad. So I see a sentence here that says a political race is a toss-up, that it could go either way. This is a statement I will want someone else on the team, on the public editor team, to take a closer look at and decide if there's anything problematic with the way this author has discussed, some probabilistic event. I also have a tag here on the left for evidence, and this evidence label, this evidence tag, is supposed to be used whenever there's data that is being used to support some conclusion or claim. And here I see something in the article about some polls in this election showing that one candidate is up by 4.5 percentage points. Again, it's not my job here to make a judgment about whether this is correct or not, but just to send it along to someone else who can take a very close look at it. It's also one of the tasks here is to label for any issues of tone or typos. Is the author biasing the story with strong words? Is it sloppily written? Is it ambiguous? Is it manipulative? And I actually see here that one politician keeps referring to another one as cult-like, and this seems like probably something that someone else on our team should take a look at. So again, what I've been doing here is a task called semantic triage, where I'm looking at an entire article and I'm finding passages that need to be sent along for further evaluation. If this was my job, I would be pretty satisfied that I've done an okay job. I would click save and next, and I'd start looking at a new article. When I do that, these different passages get sent to a next set of annotators. And this is what it looks like here for a language task. So those sections of language that I highlighted, cult-like and so forth, these in the red, have now been passed along to a next set of workers. And it's the job of this worker to focus on the bolded text here on the left and answer the questions about the text. Now, a lot of you have probably seen tasks like this in school, where you're supposed to look at a block of text and answer questions about it. So this probably seems relatively familiar to you. When I read through this, it's asking me to check to see if I see metaphorical language or exaggeration, etc. This seems like exaggeration to me, so I'm going to click this box here. I want you to notice something that happens when I click the box, which is that this little inkwell appeared. If there's an inkwell that appears in the public editor system, it's your prompt, your cue, that you should highlight the text that justifies your answer. So I'm going to go through and say that all of this stuff about cults seems like an exaggeration. And if I click next, the system is actually smart enough to know that you just clicked exaggeration, and now it's asking you how bad is the exaggeration. And I'm going to say this is some kind of considerable misrepresentation. Now I want you to know something. When you're doing these tasks, you will not be doing them alone. So other people will look at this and they'll have their own opinion about maybe this is some misrepresentation, maybe it's only a minor misrepresentation, or maybe someone will say it's an enormous misrepresentation. It's the job of the system to find the consensus among the different annotators. So just be responsible for your own thoughts and opinions about how bad one of these mistakes is. You can leave it to the system and your other teammates to actually find a consensus that's a fair representation of the problem. Okay, let me hop back over to our presentation here. With Public Editor, I've just showed you a few of the things we look for. So I showed you with the language task, we're looking for exaggeration and slang and metaphors that are unhelpful and stuff like that. We actually look for over 40 different types of misinformation. So we look for common reasoning errors, argumentative fallacies, inferential mistakes, misuse of evidence, cognitive biases, rhetorical flourishes. There are over 40 of these different types of errors that we find in the system. And if you spend some time in Public Editor learning to do the different tasks of the system, you'll end up learning pretty much all of these. And you'll be able to spot them in the news a little bit better. I want to show you the output of Public Editor itself. So when all of this annotation is applied to an article, you end up with an article that looks like this, which is a very different news reading experience than most people have. So this looks kind of like a normal article, but notice that there are these underlines. And if I hover over them, I get to learn what kind of mistake is represented by those words in the text. So this sentence here has some circular reasoning. It has availability bias. You'll learn exactly what those things mean by working with Public Editor. This sentence here has a distraction or a red herring, has a straw man fallacy as well. etc. So on the right here, we have this credibility hallmark. Anything in the public editor system, if you have curiosity about it, there will be a question mark you can click to understand how it works. This credibility hallmark allows you to quickly understand an article's credibility score from 0 to 100. And if you hover over the different sections of it, you learn how many points are being taken off for circular reasoning. I can click on that to scroll directly to the error. How many points are taken off for availability bias, for strawman fallacy, for distraction, for bogus assumptions, etc. So this is a different kind of newsreader experience that's going to help the public to not get fooled in the first place, but also to learn over time all of these different reasoning errors that we humans fool each other with, whether intentionally or not. Okay, so that brings me a little bit, we have a good sense now of the public editor system, how it's helpful to newsreaders, what it's like to participate as an annotator and volunteer. And really what we're hoping to accomplish with this study, and we're so thankful to all of you for participating in this study, we're hoping to understand how to really engage a community and keep them engaged. So I can't tell you every detail of the study because you're going to have different experiences throughout the study, but what we're really trying to do is understand what kinds of incentives, what kinds of inducements, what kinds of gamification, tricks and rewards and so forth really make you all happy. So some of you are going to be in conditions where you're getting a fair amount of communication of a certain type, and then others will be in a condition of the experiment where you're getting communications of some other type. None of these are going to be bad. We're not trying to test how much we can annoy you, but they are going to be a little bit different. And we're hoping to see by the end of this that some of them work better than others, or they work when they're put in particular combinations. And this will allow us to do the very best job as we launch to a broader community. This will allow us to do the very best job setting up incentives that make annotators like you happy. One of the things that will come at the end of the study is that many of you, most of you, maybe all of you who have participated will earn some of these licenses and certifications that you can display on your LinkedIn profiles. So we think that this is going to be helpful in the future in a world where there's continuing to be a lot of misinformation, to be able to show on your professional profiles your capacities for discernment and critical thinking. So here's just an example of one of those for our quoted sources annotator task. We will have licenses and certifications for the different tasks in the public editor system, including some that culminate in a very nice certificate for just overall general critical thinking capability. The system itself is pretty smart about looking for kind of rogue behavior. So that's another thing we'll be testing passively based on your participation. We don't expect anyone to go rogue. That's not the concern, but we do have systems for kind of monitoring and testing the quality of participation over time. And we're going to be kind of putting those through a test. Just to give you a sense of how far the project has come, we actually started on a whiteboard back in 2015. It started with a conversation between myself and Nobel laureate Saul Perlmutter. Saul won the Nobel Prize for demonstrating that the universe is expanding at an increasing rate. Very clever guy, and has actually been teaching scientific critical thinking since 2014. I was working on this annotation technology that underlies public editor, and he asked me, could we use this to find different types of reasoning errors in the news? And very quickly, we jumped from some examples for his classroom to a system that the public would be able to operate at scale to clean up its entire media ecosystem. So we've been kind of in production and building our community since then, and it's a really big moment now for the project. We're really excited to get some of these last understandings of how best to launch as soon as we can. The system works really pretty well at scale, with 1,000 volunteers who were maybe doing half an hour or so a day. We could actually manage to evaluate the top 200 most shared articles in a news community. So if you think about the fact that even avid newsreaders probably only read 30 articles a day, if we were doing the top 200 most shared articles each day for a news community, we could cover maybe 80 or 90% of what anybody reads. So it's not actually very hard to take the public editor system to a high scale that has a big impact on the population, and we're very excited to get started with that as soon as we can. Some members of our team, I'll let anyone else pause the video and get into that if they like. We've had quite a few collaborators on the way. Of course, we're extremely happy to be working now with the Alliance for Europe and its federation of civil society organizations. To get started, it is going to be really simple. We're going to send you an email right after this webinar that will ask you to fill out a pre-study survey. This survey should only take you about 5 minutes or so. We're just going to get a basic sense of who is in the pool of annotators, so that when we divide people across the 4 different conditions of the experiment, we can try to make that as balanced as possible. Your answers to these questions won't be used in any other way. They're just to help us have a balanced pool across each of the condition groups. And then the email will also give you a link so you can get started with some training tasks. We're going to ask everybody to do these training tasks in the next 3 to 4 days. And then people can start moving into the tasks of the actual experiment itself. These training tasks just help you get up to speed on how to use the annotation interface and make sure that you understand the concepts for which you're annotating and evaluating. I'll leave this slide up for anyone who wants to connect. You can reach me easily here in case you have any questions about the project or the study. The one other thing I think we wanted to do, and I'm getting, let's see, am I getting chats from George and Omri, is that we have a fun little poll, and I'll get that started right now. And that is kind of a way for us to initially get a sense of how this annotation will work. Let me stop sharing. I think I need to do that first. And, no, I don't need to stop sharing. George, help me out.
No problem. Yes, it would be great if we have the web page back up.
Let me do that.
The websites. And while we just get that up, I'd like to also point everybody towards the Q&A session. We already have lots of interesting questions coming in. But if something popped up into your head during the presentation that you would like clarifying, now is your chance. Thank you.
Right, let me see. Okay. Here we go. Okay, we're going to do this poll, and excuse my ineptitude, but here we go. Okay. How is it looking, George? Can people see the screen?
Yes, everybody.
Okay, great. So I want to show you a simple task, and we'll kind of walk through this together as a group, and it'll just give you a sense of the sorts of tasks that we'll be asking you to do over the next few weeks. The instructions for the task are always going to be here on the right. So we just need to answer some questions about the bolded text on the left. So we have this word slammed in bold. I want to point out that if you ever need a little more context to understand what you're reading, you can kind of pull the slider to the right. If you pull it all the way to the right, it'll show you the entire article. But typically, we're trying to ask people to kind of focus on a smaller piece at a time. But let's see, we have a sentence here. Critics slammed the MSNBC host for the conspiratorial tweet, particularly amid the escalated developments of the president's illness. So we're gonna have people play along with the poll. Do we need to relaunch that, George, or is it up for people right now? Are they likely to see it?
The first question is now launched.
Great, okay, so the question is, excuse me, the bolded text on the left, do we think this is metaphorical language, exaggeration, scandal, or emotional tone? And I want to use this opportunity to show you that that real life problems in news articles are sometimes difficult to adjudicate. It's sometimes hard to see, you know, is this metaphorical, is it exaggeration, is it scandal? And I just want you to note that these little blue arrows are here to help you every step of the way. So if I click on this blue question mark, a screen pops up and it gives me a definition of what we mean by metaphorical language and even an example of a metaphor. And same for exaggeration. And same for scandal and emotional tone. You'll see these throughout the system. So what we really try to do with Public Editor is give you everything, all the information you need right there in the interface. So some of you have answered already, but let's go ahead and look at these. Metaphorical language is often good writing and not problematic, but sometimes it's used to color an event, especially in a biased way, especially in negative metaphors of disease, filth, invasion. You'll have a chance later to see if any metaphors or analogies you find are misleading or just fine. So as an example, she ran as fast as a river. We also have exaggeration. Exaggeration is sometimes used for comic effect. You will get a chance later to see how misleading you think the exaggeration is. And this is important. In this whole system, you always get a chance to say how misleading or how problematic you think something is. We also have the possibility of scandal. It's treating some discovery as scandalous. It's often used to distract from some more important issue or to encourage emotional reactions. So the example here is the principal of the school was secretly dating a history teacher. And it may be that they were just dating. It may be that there was nothing immoral or problematic about them dating, but adding the word secretly adds a layer of scandal to the situation. So let's see, and we also have emotional tone. Emotional tones are often express humor, threat, joy. Sometimes they might come in the form of expletives or just very strong emotional statements. So let's see, are people allowed to change their answers, George, or are they locked in?
While it's still open, you can change your answer.
Okay.
But let's log in and then see what people think after they've seen the other two questions as well.
Okay, great. So let's go ahead and close for that question. And let's see, what's our next poll question? Right. So whether you chose metaphorical language or you chose exaggeration or scandal or emotional tone, the next question is, how bad do you think it is? Is it extremely excessive? Is it considerably excessive, somewhat, mildly, or not at all? And here we just want to demonstrate that the system is going to be able to find a consensus among you about this. Okay, we have results coming in.
Yes, it seems everybody is a little bit more warmed up now with the polls, so the results are coming in quite a bit quicker. I will close this in just a moment. So any last chances before we go on to the final question?
Okay. And then question number 3, can we move to that? Question number 3 is just a general question for all of you. How often do you see metaphors or exaggerations or emotional tone like this in the news that you read? Okay, we have answers coming in quickly.
Perfect.
This is fun. Great.
Yes. So I'm closing this final poll now, and then we can go into some of the results.
Yeah, let's take a look at the results. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so on question number 1, we had a bit of we had some variation in our responses here, and this one was pretty difficult actually to determine whether the word "slammed" here is exaggeration or a metaphor or emotional tone is actually a little bit difficult. And it looks like most people settled on this being a very emotional tone, which I can definitely agree with. I think it's also a form of metaphor. I don't think anyone was literally slamming anyone, like, slamming them on the ground or anything like that. I can also understand why people would choose exaggeration. With Public Editor, these are some of the most difficult kind of judgments that people in the system will have to make. And one of the things that we're doing with the system still is figuring out how to kind of separate out these different types of issues and make sure that we all train a little bit to understand the nuances between them. So I would say of the 4 options given, the 3 that were most commonly chosen are definitely the most correct of the 4. In another week or 2, if we were to do a similar task like this, I think a lot of us would bunch up around one answer a little bit more. And that's something that we're going to learn as we go through time. So consider that you've done well and don't worry about having anything perfectly right at this point. Let's move on to question number 2. Now with question number 2, it looks like most people did agree that this was a considerably excessive or inappropriate. Some people said somewhat, some people said it was mild. One thing that's really great about the public editor system is when we have answer choices like this that are on a scale, they're not categorical answers, but you can almost imagine them going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The system can automatically find the average across them. So the system would pretty easily be able to say that this is a considerably excessive or inappropriate based on the answers of everybody who was in the group. Finally, with question number 3, we really just asked this one to see how prominent this sort of mistake or exaggeration or metaphor or inappropriate emotional tone, how prominent is this within the news media diet that we all are reading? And it looks like this is something that shows up often or very often for most of us. And that's something we want to change with Public Editor over time. If we can label all of these exaggerations, these unhelpful metaphors, this excessive emotional tone, and we can share that with the news reading public and the journalists who are writing that news and their editors, over time, we expect that our whole civic public discourse can actually be improved. We know that people respond to ratings, and journalists will respond to public editors' ratings. If a journalist is frequently losing points on public editor because they can't help themselves making these big exaggerated claims and metaphors, over time, they're probably going to become a little more careful, and we can expect our entire news discourse to improve gradually over time. Thanks for participating in that little fun little study. Obviously, what we're doing over the next few weeks is on a much grander scale. There's a lot more that we'll learn, each of us as we go and do more of these tasks, but also as a group and community as we analyze the results from the tasks that we perform together. So.
Thank you very much for that, Nick. I'm just moving things around on the screen now, and collecting all this poll data. So I see that we do also have some Q&A questions, if you have some time to go through those in the next 2 minutes.
Let's address them.
Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. There's a couple that I can group together, actually. There's a lot of interest in the languages of the articles. Will these only be written in English? Will we do different groups for different languages? And how is this based on where we're located as well?
Great questions. So right now for this study, we're going to be doing articles in English just for the moment. The public editor system can be translated for different languages. So we anticipate that we will be releasing a form of public editor that's in German rather soon, and also in French. After that, we would probably move to Spanish. And we want to be launching these different versions of public editor in different languages over the next year. For the purposes of this study, we just have a set of articles, a smaller set of articles that are all in the English language. And I apologize for the limitations of our team. That's probably where we need to start with our analysis, but we will be launching as quickly as possible in other languages.
Okay, excellent. A quick point also on the consensus building tools. So perhaps you could elaborate a little bit further on how these groups end up being graded and how this ends up being reliable.
Yes. So when all of the annotators in the public editor system will start out by doing training tasks, and we're going to send those training tasks to you tonight. As soon as this webinar recording is ready to be sent, as soon as there's a link from the video, we'll send out an email that has a link to the webinar and also has some of these training tasks that you can begin immediately. Everyone who uses the public editor system starts out with training tasks where our team has already defined what the right answers are. So we can quickly kind of evaluate the trainees, the volunteers like yourselves, and help you have some feedback on whether you're learning to do the task properly. As long as you're doing the tasks well, we will then invite you to start working on live articles, raw data that has not yet been evaluated. When you are working on those live raw data, every task you do is also going to be done by at least 2 other people, sometimes 5, 7, or 9 other people. And we will be looking for a consensus among those annotators. So everyone should feel confident to answer as best as you can, but also know that you have teammates who are kind of backing you up. And so you don't have to get it right we don't have this concept of getting it right for every perspective for all time. We have a concept that the truth is actually something that's a consensus of what multiple different people can see. So for any given answer for the system, for any given label of the public editor system that gets published, there's always more than one person's judgment behind that label. But also, over time, we can look at how often each of our annotators is in agreement with the consensus. So if you've done 100 tasks, that's 100 opportunities for us to see if you are in consensus with the other people who also did that task independently. If you've done 1,000 tasks, that's 1,000 opportunities for us to see how often you are in consensus with the other annotators independently working in the system. So we expect people to be out of consensus here and there occasionally, but if we're all doing our best work, we think that most annotators, for most of the tasks they complete, will be in consensus with their peers.
Okay, perfect. There is one small follow-up question to this. Is there a right answer then up for debate? before we wrap this up?
Yeah, so I think in general, you know, a system built by a lot of scientists is one that includes a lot of scientific humility. There are a lot of scientific claims that have been made over the centuries and then later on debunked, or they've been corrected with more nuance over time. So, you know, if we have 99 different annotators look at one little bit of text and 99 of them agree that they're seeing an exaggeration, we would feel pretty confident that they've seen an exaggeration. But we hesitate to use words like right and wrong because we just know the limitations of kind of the human evaluation of truth. So maybe ironically or paradoxically, we care so much about the truth that we're a little careful about using that word in a flippant manner. Instead, we've tried to create a very open, transparent, accessible system where anyone can participate in seeking the truth and also observe how we go about that process.
Okay, brilliant. So to close this session, I'm going to pass over to my colleague Omri briefly, who's going to talk more shortly on the timings of the course, how you fit it into your day, and also give some final comments. So Omri, take it away.
Hello, everybody. So here I am just to give some closing thoughts. I hope that this was enlightening after you've heard so much about Public Editor through the emails and various communications that you might have seen, that we now have kind of taken the step of actually launching this. We had a very crucial question about time management and how you fit this into your busy lives. Essentially, the system is gamified, and what you need to do is go through it at your own time. Essentially, as this is a training course in media literacy and communications, you will receive a certificate, as Nick explained earlier, based on doing 3 hours for 3 weeks. So 3 consecutive weeks of 3 hours of annotation, getting through this program. Nick, maybe you want to also give any other thoughts in this, but essentially the system will guide you through. You don't need to allocate, specific lesson times where you will have to attend another webinar or attend any sort of like live lesson. You just need to follow through the platform, which you should be able to complete in the time frame that we described. And essentially, once you complete it, then you get your certificate that you've completed it. So that's about it. We're very excited to be launching this. We're very, very excited to be welcoming you on board and sort of going on this journey together. And of course, this is a sort of a first generation of people in Europe doing this. And once you've done it, we'll be able to then scale it up to different languages, different countries, different communities of people, and go from having this powerful training tool to having a tool that can really impact how we read the news and how we consume media and information. So with that, I'll close it here. I really would like to thank Nick for the presentation and George for all you've done getting this together and for the hosting today. And yes, see you on the other side. If there are any further questions or thoughts that you have, just reply to the emails, get in touch with us, and we'll follow up in writing. And if you're watching the recorded version, that I thank you for getting all the way through. And take care. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.